Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and we're here live from the VRMA conference in Phoenix, Arizona with Scott Sage. Scott, good to see you in person.
Jamie, great to see you in person. Great to be here at VRMA in this beautiful exhibit hall, right?
Yeah. So as a former or halfway current property manager, does this feel like a homecoming for you with all your people?
It certainly does. I'm now on the other side of the conference, standing in a booth.
Yeah.
Come by booth 400 if you're listening to this live. But great to be here, great to be at VRMA, and exciting things to come today.
So, there's the whole lanyard thing of like white lanyard, red lanyard. What color lanyard are you wearing today?
I'm now red because I'm a vendor, and I'd like to call out your specific lanyard, and your placard has a rock star ribbon on it. Only a handful of those were given out for a handful of rock stars here at VRMA.
Yeah, shout out to Tiana at Touch Day for handing that out. She is the true rock star.
Well, great. We're here today to talk about September U.S. review. And maybe a good place to start, actually, as we've been having conversations with folks around the conference hall and around the conference this week. Unfortunately, there are some folks missing, and that's a result of the hurricanes that we've had in the U.S. over the past month and a half, 2 months. And so, Jamie, obviously, we feel that presence with missing individuals here.
Yep.
What are we seeing in the data in terms of hurricane impact on the STR industry?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have two hurricanes to talk about, Hurricane Helena and Milton. So one, and both hit Florida, but one causing really significant and really catastrophic damage through western North Carolina. And the markets that we see it hit most or hurt most, western North Carolina mountains, Asheville, and Boone. So, for example, and where we can see it most clearly, because we don't have really hard estimates on total number of homes impacted, but we're seeing it clearly through the cancellation data. So over sort of the past 3 weeks, we've seen 85,000 nights canceled in just the market of Asheville, North Carolina. And on a typical 3-week period, we'd see like 10,000, 12,000. So we've seen a 6.5x increase in cancellations. I think on the flip side, though, it's not all bad for short-term rental performance. I'm from Atlanta. We've seen a 50% increase in bookings in Atlanta in the aftermath from the hurricane. So
There's some displacement going on.
There is some displacement, both in people that have evacuated from Orlando and Asheville, sort of central to both hurricane impact areas. So people evacuating, and now people that are going to have to find temporary housing elsewhere as they sort of rebuild and from the hurricane impact. So it's interesting, like when you do sort of a heat map, you've got the massive areas that were impacted. So you've got Sarasota, you've got the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area that were directly impacted by the hurricane. But then you've got the surrounding areas that are now seeing a corresponding uptick in bookings as people evacuated and now are looking to sort of have temporary housing. And some of the amazing things you see is the stories of people that maybe still their homes are intact in Asheville, now making those homes available to workers that are there for the recovery. So line workers, you've got construction workers, really people that are more than likely going to be there for the long haul, because these hurricane impacts can take years.
Yep.
So just like, and one of the big examples I look at is Mexico Beach. Like in 2018, it was impacted by Hurricane Michael. 2018, 2024 was the year that we just recovered supply for short-term rentals in that market. That's a 6-year recovery from Hurricane Michael. Like, really astonishing.
How should operators in these markets think about that and the path forward and the sustainability in this market? Is it a shift in the inventory type, a shift in the guests coming? Is this panic, doom and gloom, or is there optimism to be had post-recovery in the early innings of this?
Yeah, and I'm going to get into it some in my presentation tomorrow for at VRMA, where we're talking about the outlook, but you can't get around the sort of hurricane impacts and what they're going to mean for this industry. One is on home prices and whether people just start avoiding buying homes in these areas, which will have a pretty significant negative impact on housing values. And then you also have a subsequent impact on insurance rates.
Insurance premiums, yep.
They're going up in states like Florida, where it's a shared sort of disaster recovery fund. It's not just going to be properties on the coast that are seeing the increase in premiums. It's properties throughout the entire state of Florida that are going to see these impacts, because and the initial estimates are in the $50 billion impact range. And that just
hard to fathom.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, appreciate the context and data perspective on the hurricane, and wishing anybody listening who's impacted a quick recovery and safety in those regions. All right. Well, let's talk September.
Yep.
U.S. market performance. Headline here, maybe let's just get it out of the way. A weaker September than we had hoped.
I wouldn't say weaker than we hoped, but I think in line with expectations. So for those of you following along, we talked about this last month. There was the calendar shift of moving Labor Day or the majority of Labor Day weekend from September into August. And for our industry, made August very strong. And we talked about it like it was, I think, surprisingly strong. It was like, wow, like things are good. And now fast forward 30 days later, and it's like.
That's right. August had the holiday bump.
Yeah.
September had the holiday skid.
Yep. So, yeah, and I think there are some positive aspects, though, in terms of performance, too, that we can get into. So maybe we'll start with just like headline nights booked and demand, because that's what I'm always focused on, because nights booked actually isn't going to have the holiday shift, because this is how many nights we're getting booked in September for any future time period. And there we saw nights booked up about 2.9%. And 2.9% in a period where we had been seeing growth in anywhere from 5 to 10%, like that is weak nights booked. And just remind everyone, we're in an environment of supply growth anywhere from, it's been averaging about 5 to 6%. September was actually a little bit weak for overall available listings, only up 3.9%. So nights booked up 2.9, available listings up 3.9. We're roughly keeping pace, which was, we talk about holiday pacing, like they're going to be roughly in line too, but it's always good to, and we've got a caveat like, yes, weaker demand, but weaker supply growth as well.
And how does that supply growth trend continue from spring into summer? Now we're entering the fall here.
Yeah, so if you think back at the beginning of the year, we were trending up about 8-9%. As we got into spring, summer, we were trending up about 7-8%. And now the last few months, we've been about 4-5%. So it's definitely been trending down. Our expectation for full year is going to be 7%. And then our expectation for full year 2025 is about 6.5%. So we do expect to sort of be bottoming in terms of overall supply growth, and then rebounding a bit as we head into next year. But there's some key risks out there, and that's specifically around what's going to happen around urban supply. Because overall supply growth in urban areas, it was down 3.1%. A piece of that is New York, but now we're starting to lap those sort of losses in New York from last year. So it's not all New York anymore. This is real loss in urban listings, really throughout urban cores in the top 50 metro areas.
What are the drivers there?
A big driver is regulation. The secondary driver is just continued weak performance in urban markets. Like we saw it with Front Desk going under one of the larger urban property managers. And it's just, the more and more urban property managers I talk to, it's like I have to go in knowing that it's going to be a depressing conversation, because I just haven't heard the optimism that I hear from some of the other operators operating in some of the small and mid-sized cities around the country. Like they're just not seeing really any strength in demand right now.
In your conversations you have with the dozens, hundreds of operators you talk to, where are there urban bright spots?
It's mostly in smaller urban markets. Like you got to get outside of San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, like maybe in the Houston, Dallases, but even those are being impacted by regulation. Dallas in particular. Austin's still weak. Nashville, and not a lot of bright spots there. Some of these markets are helped by regulation in terms of at least like restricting the amount of supply coming in. But there's real competition, not just with, and yes, more short-term rentals coming in, but also with hotels. And that is something that we've been doing more and more research on, of just competing for the, let's say, 1 to 4 night stay. Like we are seeing maybe some shift back from, and people were really excited about staying in short-term rentals. But now there's real competition, especially on price, and sort of convenience factor of what makes most sense to stay in for those type of stays.
Well, let's go to price. Now zooming back out from urban to the full U.S. market, we saw ADR was up 2.7% for the month of September.
Yep. So that's good. I think back this time last year, we were seeing declines in ADRs, prices across the board, really across all different location types. Now we are seeing some pricing power. And I think that comes with the stabilization and occupancies that we've been seeing throughout the year. So we're no longer in an environment where occupancies were falling 4 or 5% that we were seeing last year. So now that does give people a little bit of confidence that they can at least hold or slightly increase prices. Yeah.
So what did we see in occupancy for the month of September?
So I said we were holding occupancy. And this is really impacted by the calendar shift. So occupancy was down 4% in September. We don't expect that to be a trend, though we do see occupancy falling in October. And we can see that clearly in the pacing data that it's probably going to be another month of falling occupancy levels. Sorry. Occupancy in October's up, occupancy in November's down. So yeah, October looking good, especially around Halloween. Halloween can be a big month, and like in many of the markets, October is like peak leaf peeping season. And it's one of my favorite terms that I
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I had never heard this term, leaf peeping. But it's essentially that you travel to the mountains, especially the Appalachian Mountains, to just experience the foliage changing, changing colors. And like it can be really strong demand throughout in the Northeast, going from Maine all the way down to Georgia. So Maine now, or in Northeast, we're peak, sort of just off peak, as we see it here in mid-October. And as I was just up in North Georgia last weekend, we're not quite there yet in terms of the leads starting to change.
Got it. Well, so we talked ADR up just shy of 3%, but occupancy down contributed to RevPAR being down 1.5 points.
Yep. So RevPAR, reminder for everyone, this is essentially what we can think about is like what you're taking home and how that's changing from the year prior. So you get a little bit less occupancy, a little bit more average daily rate. That works out to slightly slightly less in your bank account on a per property basis, but 1.5%, essentially we're flat.
That's
and
right.
on a rolling 12-month basis, we're essentially flat as well to slightly up. So as we think about this prior year, like it's at least been better than last year.
All right, well, you gave us a sneak peek with the leaf peeping. What should we expect for holiday pacing? What are we seeing in the data?
Yeah. So, yeah, Thanksgiving we're seeing slightly down, October slightly up. What I've been really focused on is the Christmas and New Year's period, because that is, essentially, some of the highest demand we see for short-term rentals throughout the year. It's like peak during the summer, and then you get this massive peak again during the holidays. So tracking that very closely. What we're seeing for occupancy right now is essentially flat from last year. We're down like 0.3%. And there is some slight differences in sort of timing on days of the week on where we see Christmas and New Year falling, but essentially flat versus last year for holidays. So demand up overall, supply up overall, and obviously going to depend by market. So I'd highly suggest people to go into AirDNA, see how the holidays pacing for your market, see how near-term bookings are looking for your market, and get a sense of how you should be pricing if you haven't already got booked out for the holiday period.
And a great way to do that would be our new beta tool that's launching here shortly around Performance Dashboard, and that's free for users to go activate within the host tools of AirDNA. As we close here, though, Jamie, I want to end with a kudos and a congratulations to you. You just received your first and completed your first booking at your new STR, and it was 5 stars.
Yeah, 5-star review. Thanks, Susan, if you're listening. But yeah, and for those of you that have been following along on the YouTube series, and I highly suggest going and watching, as embarrassing for me it is. But we've been going through soup to nuts on me buying or finding a market, buying a property, listing it. We just hosted our first guest. Went very well. I definitely leaned towards over communicating with her in the lead up and
As
afterwards,
the data would say.
Yeah, so went well. Just got my next booking for next weekend. I'm essentially booking out the weekends, and then need to move into sort of strategy on how I can start filling in midweek.
Well, you're off to the races now.
Yeah.
Kudos, congrats, and go check out Jamie's Lane Change on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, Scott, maybe we go and enjoy, see some sessions, talk to some other vendors, talk to some property managers, and experience VRMA.
Great to record in person.
Yep.
Great to be here at VRMA. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.